What if the very thing you fear most is not an enemy at all, but a message you have not yet learned how to read? What if evil, the force we blame for pain, war, and loss, is not a cosmic mistake, but a mirror, silently reflecting the limits of our awareness? Before rejecting this idea, pause for a moment and look honestly at your own life. Every wound, every betrayal, every moment that felt unbearably dark. Did it truly come from nowhere, or did it arise from a deeper misunderstanding of reality itself? Humanity has asked this question for thousands of years. Why does evil exist? If the universe is guided by spiritual laws, if consciousness underlies all things, why is there suffering at all? Today, we are not seeking a comforting answer. We are seeking a transformative one, a perspective that does not simply explain evil, but dissolves our attachment to it. And to find that perspective, we must journey through some of the deepest insights ever offered by spiritual traditions across the world. Eastern philosophies, particularly Hinduism and Buddhism, approach evil in a way that may initially feel unsettling. They do not treat it as an external force attacking humanity from the outside. Instead, they suggest something far more intimate and far more challenging. What we call evil may be a distortion created by the human mind itself, a misinterpretation born from ignorance, not malice. Like a traveler wandering through dense fog, mistaking shadows for monsters. We project fear onto what we do not yet understand. In Hindu philosophy, this illusion is known as Maya. It is the great veil that convinces us the material world, with all its pain and chaos, is the ultimate reality. Maya persuades us that we are merely bodies, thoughts, emotions, temporary fragments struggling to survive in a hostile universe. And once we believe this story, suffering becomes inevitable, not because the world is cruel, but because we have forgotten who we truly are. The sages of Advaita Vedanta teach that the true self is untouched by pain, untouched by loss, untouched even by death. It is not the body that ages, nor the mind that fluctuates, nor the experiences that come and go. Suffering arises the moment we identify with what is transient. Evil in this view is not a substance. It is the shadow cast by limited perception. Adi Shankaracharya, one of the greatest non-dual philosophers in history, illustrated this with a deceptively simple metaphor. Imagine standing in a dark room and seeing what appears to be a snake on the floor. Fear grips your body. Your heart races. But the moment light enters the room, you realize the snake was never real. It was only a rope. Nothing changed except your perception. The same applies to evil. It appears terrifying, powerful, and real, until consciousness illuminates it. Buddhism echoes this insight with striking clarity. The Buddha did not teach that suffering exists because the world is fundamentally broken. He taught that suffering arises from the mind, specifically from ignorance, attachment, and aversion. We cling to pleasure as if it could last forever. We flee from pain as if it should never exist. And trapped between these two extremes, we remain caught in an endless cycle of dissatisfaction. From a Buddhist perspective, evil is not an external entity plotting against us. There is no cosmic villain, no metaphysical force battling goodness in the shadows. There is only the illusion of a separate self, a mental construct that believes it must constantly defend, acquire, and resist. Once this illusion dissolves, so does the belief in evil as an independent force. This is why the Buddha famously said, "Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional." Pain is part of the human experience, aging, loss, change. Suffering, however, is the psychological resistance we add to those experiences. When pain is met with awareness, it becomes a teacher. When it is met with fear, it becomes torment. Evil, then, is not what happens to us, it is how we relate to what happens. When a person is spiritually asleep, life appears hostile. Mistakes feel like punishments. Loss feels meaningless. Every challenge seems like proof that the world is against them. But when awareness awakens, something extraordinary happens. The same events are still there, but their meaning transforms. Pain reveals lessons. Shadows point toward unexamined areas of consciousness. What once felt like cruelty becomes initiation. The sages of Eastern traditions remind us that as long as we remain trapped in egoic identification, we will perceive reality as fragmented, good versus evil, pleasure versus pain, right versus wrong. But when this limited vision dissolves, we begin to see that everything participates in a single process of growth and learning. Evil loses its status as an enemy and takes on a new role, that of a reluctant but necessary teacher. Just as darkness does not exist as an independent force, being merely the absence of light, evil can be understood as the absence of awareness. And when awareness expands, darkness does not need to be fought. It simply fades. Yet a question naturally arises: if evil is an illusion, why does it feel so real? Why does suffering cut so deeply? The answer lies in the nature of human experience itself. We are immersed in the game of duality. Our minds have been conditioned to interpret reality through opposites, day and night, success and failure, pleasure and pain. This framework is not inherently wrong, but it is incomplete. What happens when we look beyond these polarities? When we stop clinging to labels and begin observing reality as a flowing process rather than a battlefield. In Buddhism, this liberation is called enlightenment, the state in which the mind sees reality as it is, free from projections and distortions. In Hinduism, it is known as moksha, the dissolution of the ego and the realization that separation was never real to begin with. The self that suffers and the world it fears dissolve into a single unified field of being. This leads us to a question that cannot be answered intellectually. Are we willing to see beyond appearances? Are we willing to question whether evil is truly real, or merely a reflection of our own unexamined consciousness? As long as we view the world through fear and separation, evil will continue to appear solid, threatening, and unavoidable. But the moment we awaken to our deeper nature, we may discover something unsettling and liberating at once. Evil was never a force outside us. It was a shadow cast by a mind that had not yet remembered the light. When we turn our gaze from the inner world back toward nature itself, an unmistakable pattern begins to emerge. Everything moves in pairs. Day gives way to night. Expansion follows contraction. Warmth dissolves into cold. None of these forces exist in isolation, and none can be understood without its counterpart. This rhythm is not a flaw in existence. It is the very language through which the universe expresses itself. And within this rhythm lies one of the most misunderstood keys to the mystery of evil. Hermetic philosophy, one of the oldest streams of esoteric wisdom, teaches that the universe operates according to immutable laws. Among them is the principle of polarity, which states that all things contain their opposites, not as enemies, but as variations of the same essence. Heat and cold are not separate realities, they are different degrees of the same phenomenon. Light does not battle darkness. Darkness is simply light in absence. From this perspective, good and evil are not opposing cosmic forces locked in eternal conflict, but different expressions along the same spectrum of consciousness. This insight radically transforms how we interpret suffering. If evil were an independent force, something alien to the fabric of existence, then its presence would suggest a broken universe. But if evil is a relative condition, a necessary contrast, then it becomes part of a larger evolutionary process. Without pain, peace would have no meaning. Without confusion, clarity could not arise. Without darkness, light would go unnoticed. Hermeticism suggests that the material world itself is not a punishment or a fall from grace, but a classroom, a testing ground where consciousness refines itself through experience. Challenges are not obstacles placed in our path to halt us. They are initiations designed to awaken latent understanding. Just as iron is strengthened by fire, the soul is shaped by resistance. From this view, evil does not exist to destroy us, but to press us into growth. Ancient myths across cultures echo this same truth through symbolism. In Zoroastrianism, the struggle between Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu represents not a literal cosmic war, but the tension between awareness and ignorance. In Taoism, yin and yang flow into one another endlessly, reminding us that within light there is shadow, and within shadow there is light. In Kabbalah, creation itself required a contraction of divine light, making room for separation, imperfection, and the experience of duality. What if evil is not an error to be erased, but a necessary element in the grand choreography of existence? This idea challenges our deeply ingrained moral reflexes. We are conditioned to believe that good must eliminate evil, that light must annihilate darkness. But from a Hermetic standpoint, wisdom does not come from destroying one pole. It comes from understanding both and learning how to balance them. Duality is not a mistake. It is an instrument of consciousness. A human being does not mature without facing resistance. A warrior does not gain strength without battle. A seed does not become a tree without breaking through the soil. Awakening does not occur in a vacuum of comfort. It requires confrontation with shadow. Without obstacles, there would be no discernment. Without temptation, no genuine choice. Without suffering, no depth of compassion. Seen through this lens, evil becomes a catalyst rather than a curse. This does not mean we excuse cruelty or passively accept injustice. Understanding the function of evil does not require surrendering moral responsibility. Instead, it demands a higher form of engagement, one that recognizes suffering as part of a larger process without glorifying it. Hermetic teachings emphasize that mastery lies not in indulging darkness nor in rigidly clinging to the idea of absolute goodness, but in transcending both. Those who lose themselves in darkness forget the light. Those who obsess over purity risk becoming rigid, judgmental, and blind. True wisdom emerges in the middle path, the space where opposites are harmonized rather than denied. Duality is the field in which consciousness expands. And within this cosmic game, every encounter with shadow carries the potential for illumination. Yet as humanity evolved, this philosophical understanding took on a more personal and moral dimension, especially within the framework of Christianity. Here, evil is not explained primarily as illusion or contrast, but as choice, a consequence of free will. Christian theology asserts that evil is not an independent cosmic force rivaling God. God, understood as infinite love and goodness, did not create evil as a substance. Instead, evil arises when free will is misused, when conscious beings turn away from the source of harmony. Without the freedom to choose otherwise, goodness would be meaningless. Love that cannot be refused is not love. Obedience without alternative is not virtue. This idea is symbolized powerfully in the story of the Garden of Eden. God places humanity in a world of abundance, yet at the center of the garden stands the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The question often asked is, why was the tree there at all? Why allow the possibility of error? The answer lies in the nature of freedom. A world without the possibility of choosing wrongly would be a world without genuine choice. The tree represents not temptation alone, but the threshold of moral autonomy. Humanity's fall is not simply disobedience, It is the birth of self-awareness, responsibility, and consequence. The figure of Lucifer further embodies this principle. Known as the angel of light, his fall is not caused by inherent evil but by pride, the decision to place personal will above divine order. Evil then is not created, it is chosen. It emerges when separation replaces alignment. St. Augustine articulated this idea with profound simplicity, arguing that evil has no substance of its own. It is a privation of good, just as darkness is the absence of light. Everything God created is inherently good, but when good is distorted, misused, or detached from its source, evil appears. Humanity was not created for corruption, yet when it turns away from truth, a void forms, and that void is experienced as suffering. This leads to an uncomfortable but essential question. If evil is a result of free will, why do humans so often choose it? The Apostle Paul captures this inner conflict with raw honesty. I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I keep on doing. This struggle is not an anomaly. It is the human condition. Every person carries within them the tension between aspiration and impulse, between awareness and habit. Even Christ in the desert faced temptation, illustrating that the battle between good and evil is not external but internal. Christianity does not present humanity as irredeemably flawed. It offers repentance, not as punishment but as return. Redemption is always available because the purpose of freedom is not condemnation but transformation. The parable of the prodigal son embodies this truth. The son's suffering is not the end of his story, it is the moment that awakens him. And the father's embrace reveals that the ultimate aim of freedom is reunion with the light. In this view, many of humanity's greatest tragedies are not acts of fate or demonic intervention, but the cumulative result of misaligned choices. War, exploitation, environmental destruction, these are expressions of consciousness disconnected from responsibility. Evil is not imposed upon us, it is enacted through us. And yet within this realization lies power. If evil is a choice, then so is goodness. Every decision, no matter how small, carries the potential to realign us with truth. Freedom can lead to destruction, but it can also lead to redemption. If Christianity frames evil as the consequence of free will, Kabbalah carries the inquiry even further, into the architecture of creation itself. Here, suffering is not a punishment, nor a failure of divine love, but a deliberate mechanism embedded within existence to awaken consciousness. From this perspective, pain does not arrive to break us. It arrives to refine us like pressure shaping a diamond hidden deep within the earth. According to Kabbalistic teaching, before creation there was only infinite divine light, boundless, unified, and all-encompassing. There was no separation, no individuality, no lack. But for the universe to exist, for beings to experience themselves as distinct, self-aware entities, a contraction had to occur. This contraction, known as Tzimtzum, was not an act of abandonment, but of generosity. The infinite withdrew itself just enough to allow space for creation to emerge. That space, however, came with a consequence, the experience of absence. And it is this absence that human beings feel as suffering. Evil, from the Kabbalistic view, is not a force acting against creation, but the sensation of distance from the source. When consciousness loses awareness of its origin, fear arises. When fear persists, confusion follows. And when confusion hardens, suffering takes shape. Evil is not something that exists on its own. It is what reality feels like when divine connection is obscured. This idea reaches its most powerful expression in the doctrine known as the breaking of the vessels. According to Rabbi Isaac Luria, one of the greatest mystics in Kabbalistic history, The divine light that flowed into the initial structures of creation was too intense for them to contain. The vessels shattered, scattering fragments of light throughout existence. The world we inhabit is formed from these fragments mixed with distortion and concealment. Humanity's role then is not merely to survive in this fractured world, but to participate in its repair. This process is called tikkun, the restoration of wholeness. Every act of awareness, compassion, and understanding retrieves a spark of lost light. Every moment of suffering carries within it the potential for correction. From this viewpoint, suffering is not meaningless. It is instructional. It reveals where light has not yet been integrated. This reframes pain in a radical way. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" Kabbalah invites us to ask, "What is this experience revealing about my consciousness?" Suffering exposes inner fractures, attachments, fears, illusions that cannot be seen when life is comfortable. Without friction, there is no movement. Without resistance, there is no growth. This does not mean suffering should be glorified or sought. Kabbalah is clear. Pain is not the goal. Transformation is. If a lesson is learned, suffering need not repeat itself. But if the message is ignored, life has a way of reintroducing it again and again, not as punishment but as persistence. A compassionate insistence that consciousness awaken. This explains why patterns repeat in human lives. The same relationships, the same conflicts, the same disappointments appearing in different forms. Until awareness shifts, the lesson remains incomplete. Evil, in this sense, behaves like a strict but devoted teacher, unyielding until understanding dawns. What we resist persists. What we understand transforms. Some of the most profound awakenings in human life emerge not from moments of joy, but from moments of collapse. Loss teaches impermanence. Pain cultivates empathy. Darkness provokes the search for light. Without suffering, many would never question the surface of reality, never seek depth, never ask who they truly are beneath roles and identities. Yet Kabbalah goes even further. It insists that transformation is not passive. One is not meant to endure suffering endlessly in silence. The purpose is not resignation, but response. Conscious action is required. If darkness represents the absence of light, then responsibility lies with the individual to introduce more light. Through ethical action, self-awareness, study, meditation, and compassion, the fragments begin to realign. Each conscious choice repairs not only the individual's soul, but the collective fabric of reality. This is where evil ceases to be something that merely happens to us and becomes something we actively engage with. We are not victims of fate. We are participants in creation. But this responsibility comes with a subtle challenge. When confronted with suffering, the mind often reacts in extremes. Either it resists entirely, drowning in bitterness and victimhood, or it spiritualizes pain prematurely, bypassing emotional truth. Kabbalah rejects both extremes. It teaches a dynamic balance. Acknowledge the pain fully, but do not identify with it. Learn from it, but do not worship it. True spiritual maturity lies in discernment, knowing when to accept what cannot be changed, and when to act decisively to transform what can. Some suffering is inherent to existence, impermanence, aging, loss. Other suffering is optional, created by unconscious behavior, fear-based choices, and unexamined beliefs. Wisdom lies in distinguishing between the two. At this stage, the question naturally arises: if suffering is so instructive, why does the world still seem overwhelmed by cruelty and chaos? Why does awareness not spread faster? The answer may lie in the pace of consciousness itself. Evolution, whether biological or spiritual, unfolds gradually. The human nervous system, psyche, and collective structures are still learning how to hold higher levels of awareness. Rapid illumination without integration would be destabilizing. Growth, therefore, arrives in waves, often preceded by crisis. From a broader perspective, what appears as chaos may be the breakdown of outdated structures, making room for deeper coherence. Systems collapse not because evil has won, but because they can no longer sustain the level of consciousness emerging within humanity. Pain often signals not failure, but transition. This does not negate responsibility. It amplifies it. The more awareness one attains, the greater the obligation to act with integrity. To remain conscious in an unconscious world is not comfortable, it is demanding. But it is precisely this tension that accelerates collective evolution. Evil, then, is not an endpoint, it is a threshold, and once this threshold is crossed, a profound realization emerges. The greatest transformation does not occur by fighting evil directly, but by transcending the level of consciousness that gives rise to it. Hatred cannot dissolve hatred. Fear cannot eliminate fear. Only awareness can reconfigure the conditions from which they emerge. This realization prepares us for the final and most practical question of all. If evil is illusion, contrast, choice, and teacher, what is our role in relation to it? How do we live in a world where suffering exists without being consumed by it? That question leads us into the final movement of this journey. If evil is not merely an external force, but a reflection, a contrast, a consequence of choice, and a teacher woven into the structure of existence, then the question shifts from why does evil exist to something far more intimate and demanding. What is our responsibility in relation to it? Understanding alone is not enough. Insight without embodiment remains incomplete. Every spiritual tradition ultimately converges on this truth. Evil is not transcended through denial or fear, but through awareness brought into action. One of the most overlooked aspects of this process is self-knowledge. Again and again, wisdom traditions point inward before pointing outward. The chaos we condemn in the world often mirrors the unresolved conflict within us. Carl Jung articulated this with unsettling precision when he spoke of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we repress, deny, or refuse to acknowledge. These rejected aspects do not disappear. They are projected outward, transformed into enemies, villains, and threats we believe exist independently of us. Much of what humanity labels as evil is shadow energy unrecognized. Anger disowned becomes violence projected. Fear ignored becomes hatred rationalized. Power suppressed becomes domination expressed unconsciously. Until these inner dynamics are faced, attempts to eliminate evil externally often reproduce it in new forms. History is filled with examples of movements that sought to destroy evil, only to become its embodiment. This is why genuine transformation begins with inner confrontation. To integrate the shadow does not mean indulging destructive impulses, nor does it mean excusing harmful behavior. It means bringing unconscious material into awareness, where it can be transformed rather than acted out blindly. When the shadow is illuminated, it loses its compulsive force. What was once destructive becomes usable energy. Anger becomes clarity, fear becomes discernment, pain becomes compassion. Yet self-knowledge alone is not sufficient. Awareness must be paired with conscious choice. If evil arises through free will, then every moment presents an opportunity to realign that will. Transcending evil is not achieved through grand gestures alone, but through small, consistent decisions. How we speak when we are frustrated. How we act when no one is watching. How we respond when we are wounded. Goodness is not a static identity, it is a daily practice. Evil persists not only because harmful actions occur, but because conscious action is absent. Indifference allows cruelty to thrive. Silence can become complicity. Awareness demands engagement. However, engagement does not mean reaction. One of the most subtle traps in confronting evil is becoming entangled in the same emotional frequency that generates it. Rage against injustice can easily transform into self-righteousness. Fear of harm can mutate into control. The very energy used to fight evil can unconsciously replicate its structure. This is why many traditions emphasize a middle path, neither passive acceptance nor aggressive opposition, but strategic, conscious response. Taoism expresses this through the principle of Wu Wei, effortless action aligned with the natural flow. It does not mean doing nothing. It means acting without unnecessary resistance, without egoic inflation, without being consumed by what one opposes. Applied to evil, this means observing without denial, acting without hatred, and responding without losing inner balance. The goal is not to destroy darkness, but to transmute it. Energy is never eliminated, it is redirected. Anger can become courage. Grief can deepen empathy. Suffering can awaken purpose. Another essential dimension of transcending evil lies in understanding suffering itself. Pain becomes unbearable when it is resisted or interpreted as meaningless. When suffering is met with curiosity rather than condemnation, it reveals its hidden intelligence. This does not romanticize pain, it contextualizes it. Every hardship carries information about where growth is being demanded. Kabbalah teaches that adversity returns not to punish, but to instruct. Buddhism echoes this by showing that suffering intensifies when clinging, and aversion dominate the mind. Christianity speaks of trials as refining fire. Across traditions, the message is consistent. Suffering becomes destructive only when it is misunderstood. But there is a final, deeper layer, one that challenges even the most refined moral frameworks. True transcendence of evil requires moving beyond rigid judgments of good and bad altogether. This does not abolish ethics, it refines perception. Enlightenment does not mean losing the ability to discern harm. It means seeing beyond the illusion that reality is divided into absolute moral camps. Many spiritual teachings point toward conscious neutrality, not apathy but clarity. A state in which one perceives phenomena without being consumed by emotional polarization. From this vantage point, evil is seen as a phase, a process, a distortion that can be understood and redirected rather than feared. When we react to evil with hatred, we remain bound to it. When we respond with awareness, we step outside its gravitational field. This shift in consciousness is subtle but profound. It is the difference between fighting shadows on a wall and turning toward the source of light. At higher levels of awareness, the universe reveals itself as an interconnected system of cause and effect far more intricate than human judgment can grasp. Events that appear tragic within a narrow time frame may be components of a larger reconfiguration. This does not justify harm. It contextualizes it within a broader intelligence that transcends individual understanding. As consciousness expands, blame gives way to comprehension. Victimhood dissolves into responsibility. Fear softens into curiosity. What once appeared as chaos begins to reveal hidden order. This expansion does not make one detached or cold. On the contrary, it deepens compassion. When one recognizes that ignorance, not inherent malice, is the root of most suffering, empathy replaces condemnation. The desire to awaken replaces the desire to punish. At this stage, evil loses its mythic power. It no longer appears as a monstrous force looming over humanity, but as a temporary expression of unintegrated consciousness. Something to be addressed, not worshipped. Something to be transformed, not feared. And yet, even with all this understanding, the journey remains incomplete without one final realization. Perhaps the most difficult of all. Evil does not disappear because we understand it. It dissolves because we outgrow the level of awareness that creates it. This realization prepares us for the final movement of the journey, the point where all explanations fall away, and a single question remains. At the end of this journey, after illusion has been examined, contrast understood, choice illuminated, and suffering reframed, one final realization remains, quiet, unsettling, and profoundly liberating. Evil does not vanish because it is defeated. It vanishes because the consciousness that perceives it as absolute dissolves. What we call evil has never been a fixed entity. It has been a lens, a particular way of seeing shaped by fear, separation, and limited awareness. When that lens changes, reality itself appears to change. Not because the world has transformed, but because the observer has. As consciousness expands, the universe reveals a pattern far more intricate than moral binaries allow. What once appeared as chaos begins to show coherence. What once felt like cruelty begins to reveal intelligence. This does not mean that suffering ceases to exist, but it ceases to be meaningless, and meaning changes everything. At higher levels of awareness, the question, "Why did this happen to me?" gives way to, "What is being asked of me now?" Responsibility replaces blame. Presence replaces resentment. The energy once consumed by resistance becomes available for creation. This is where the final illusion surrounding evil collapses, the belief that it must be eliminated for peace to exist. In truth, peace does not emerge from the absence of darkness, but from the presence of awareness. Light does not argue with shadows. It renders them irrelevant. When fear dissolves, evil loses its grip. When separation dissolves, hatred loses its foundation. When identification with the ego dissolves, the need for enemies dissolves with it. This does not create passivity. It creates precision. Action guided by clarity rather than reaction. Compassion rooted in strength rather than sentimentality. Discernment without condemnation. From this vantage point, life is no longer experienced as a battle between opposing forces, but as a continuous unfolding of consciousness learning itself. Pain becomes information. Conflict becomes invitation. Even loss becomes initiation into deeper presence. Many of the greatest spiritual awakenings in human history did not occur in moments of comfort, but in moments when everything familiar collapsed. Identity dissolved, certainty shattered, control slipped away. And in that void, something deeper emerged, something that had always been there, waiting beneath the noise of fear. Evil, seen from this height, is not denied, but it is no longer feared. It is recognized as a stage of development, not the destination, a signal pointing toward what has not yet been integrated, a reminder of how far consciousness still has to expand. And this realization carries a quiet responsibility, not to fix the world through force, but to embody a level of awareness that no longer feeds the patterns it seeks to transcend, to become a stabilizing presence in a reactive world, to respond where others react, to illuminate where others accuse. Every moment offers this choice. Every interaction becomes a point of leverage. Every inner shift subtly reshapes the collective field. The world does not change because evil is defeated. It changes because fewer people need it to exist in order to learn. And perhaps this is the most difficult truth of all, that evil persists not because it is powerful, but because it is useful. Useful to a level of consciousness still learning through contrast, still discovering itself through friction, still remembering what it has forgotten. But usefulness does not mean permanence. As awareness matures, the lessons once delivered through suffering are learned through understanding. What once required pain begins to unfold through insight. Evolution accelerates not through struggle, but through recognition. The question then is no longer whether evil is real or an illusion. The question is, how long do we need it? How long do we need pain to remind us of compassion? How long do we need loss to remind us of presence? How long do we need darkness to remind us of light? Each individual who awakens shortens that timeline. Each moment of clarity reduces the necessity for suffering. Each act of conscious presence loosens the grip of illusion. Evil fades not with a dramatic ending, but with a quiet forgetting. As a child outgrows old fears, as a mind outgrows outdated beliefs, one day it simply no longer serves a purpose. And when that day comes, what remains is not a perfect world, but a conscious one. A world where challenges still arise, but are met with wisdom. Where pain still exists, but no longer defines identity. Where life is no longer interpreted as punishment or reward, but as dialogue, a conversation between consciousness and itself. If this reflection resonated with you, let it linger, sit with it, question it. Notice how it shifts the way you perceive your own struggles. And if you feel called, share this perspective with someone walking through their own darkness. Because every time awareness spreads, the need for evil diminishes. And that, perhaps, is the quiet compass guiding us all home.